Welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda. Obviously, gun control still on the minds of many. On the agenda for House lawmakers is debating and voting on a pair of gun control bills that, if passed, would enact red flag laws and raise the minimum age for buying automatic weapons to 21 years of age. The proposals would also ban civilians from using high-capacity magazines and bump stocks, among other provisions. House Leader Nancy Pelosi has slated to vote on the bills for this week. But there's no word on how soon those votes can happen, if they happen at all. Top Republican Democratic senators signaled a reluctance last week to involve the White House in an upcoming slate of gun control legislation, which seeks to address a string of mass shootings over the past several weeks. This came after President Biden initially called for a response from Congress last Thursday. Remember that, specifically advocating for universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons, raising the minimum purchase age, again, 21 for most rifles, and federal red flag laws. After Democratic Senator Chris Murphy suggested on CNN interview that Democrats in Congress, well, he's saying we have a better chance of delivering if the president doesn't get involved. Joining us once again, Robert Patillo and Rick Green. Gentlemen, thank you for sticking around. So what do you think, Robert? I mean, are they better off if the president kind of just sits there on the sidelines, if you will?
Absolutely. And I think we talked about this in the immigration context before, that you could have Joe Biden introduce, Ted Cruz's immigration plan, and you couldn't get a single Republican to vote in favor of it. The same thing with gun control. You could actually have President Biden come out and say, look, I want to have free AR-15s at every McDonald's in the country, and Republicans will vote it down just because Joe Biden said it. So I think having the Congress people, the Congress and the Senate negotiate these things, paring it down to something that can actually pass, not the Christmas tree bills that we often see where you're going to get all these special interests involved. Let's get to something that we can get 60 votes on the United States Senate and get it pushed through. I think things such as raising the minimum age to buy a firearm to 21 with exceptions, I think that's something most people can get behind. You have to be 21 to buy liquor. It should be the same rules unless you're in the military, law enforcement, or other special training. I think that the idea of universal background checks, most people agree with this. You shouldn't have crazy people and criminals buying guns. I think that closing the gun show loophole, there are now internet systems that can instantly do a background check on you. We can close those things up. So I think we can get the common sense solutions. If you just keep it out of the media limelight, keep the special interest out of the room, and just get to something people can agree on.
So, and Rick, I do want you to weigh on this, but I know one of the things that Robert Patillo, you've said over and over again on the show, is you're a big Second Amendment pro guy. A lot of these things have been tossed around time and time and time again. A lot of people thinking that they're focusing more on the manner in which these occurred versus the how. But this is where these red flag laws kind of come into play. There's still a lot of people concerned, though, that people may be flagged wrongfully so, and that this could actually create more issues when it comes to a stigma for mental health. For example, if you're in a stressful position and you admit that you have anxiety or depression, you may be wrongfully flagged and the guns may be taken away from you. Does this concern you at all?
It does. I think that we cannot turn people who have suffered from various forms of mental illness into kind of this pariah of the community, because they kind of get blamed and scapegoated for everything that happens. So I think that has to be the sections that is most narrowly curtailed. But the highest levels of gun violence and gun deaths in this country are suicides. So if we can put red flag laws in place where people are suicidal, they can actually reach out for help instead of killing themselves, I think most people can agree with that. So I think our people have made psychotic threats to harm individuals. I think in both of the most recent mass shootings, these individuals have made either online threats or had been spoken to by either school officials or law enforcement previously about threats they made. I think you have to if you put these things in line, barriers in place where they can't simply walk into the store and buy one, well, then we're in a good position to actually try to bring things back in. I think you keep this narrowly tailored, you keep it very specific, and you can get things done. We're not going to get an assault weapons ban. You're not going to get magazine limitations. You're not going to get some of the more wild ideas from either side of the aisle. But I think we can actually get something done if we have goodwill people on both sides of the discussion.
So here you have Robert saying that. Rick, what are your thoughts about this? Because there has been bipartisan support in the past for these red flag laws. And Robert Patillo is right. The stats show that suicides, that's the number one concern versus mass shootings, that an individual who's an adult is more likely to die by a self-inflicted wound, gunshot, versus a mass shooting. But Again, a lot of people are leery about this, and people have said, there were red flags, so to speak, when it came to these shooters, and nothing happened. So there's a lot of things that need to be worked out, again, if this happens. But I want to know your thoughts. Do you support this as a Republican?
Absolutely not. And you should be very concerned about this. We've seen the two-tier justice system of the last 2 years. We've seen the abuse of the system depending on political views, let alone in this case, as Robert's talking about, if you had a bout of anxiety over anything and now you're on some list where they can prevent you from protecting yourself and your family and literally violating your constitutional rights. So all the things that they're talking about are window dressing. It's not going to ultimately save lives. It'll end up costing lives because it'll make it harder for you to have the good guys and gals out there that are trained to defend themselves and their family and the kids at the school. It'll make it harder for them to do that. We're ignoring the big issue. The big issue is the depravity of man, the heart of man. There's evil in the world. There are always going to be wolves preying on the sheep. And the only thing that's going to stop these mass murder events is what often stops mass murder events, and that is a sheepdog near the sheep when the wolf shows up. So compare Uvalde, an hour and 20 minutes of being able to kill as many kids as this guy wanted to kill before we finally stopped him, versus the next day, the very next day in West Virginia, when another mass murderer showed up and was going to kill 40 people at a party. You had a sheepdog with a ponytail. This gal that had a concealed carry license and was trained, took it out, stopped the threat in seconds. And that's what it takes, in seconds, instead of that bad guy being able to kill a lot of good people. That's how you stop this nonsense. Everything else is window dressing. You may be able to find an anecdotal story of how it stopped something. Assault weapon bans and all that stuff does not work. The president lies about this stuff all the time. It is not just in America. We're not 30% of the mass murder events. We're 3% of the mass murder events when you actually do real data instead of what these people do to manipulate it. So I wish they would talk real solutions. Also, how about cultural solutions like returning the 10 Commandments and actually teaching right and wrong in our schools? We ought to thumb our nose at the Supreme Court and say, forget your Stone v. Graham decision in 1980 that took the 10 Commandments out of our schools. It's time to teach our kids once again, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. Those are good things to be teaching our children, and you'll see a difference in the culture. You're not going to get rid of all of it, but you'll reduce it. We've created a world where it's okay to be crazy. Your truth is your truth. Whatever you believe is fine. Anything goes. Everything's okay. Of course we're going to get more of this nonsense when the culture says that.
What about the moral compass and getting to the root cause of this? Again, you have the vice president, Kamala Harris, deemed the czar of immigration. I mean, I could argue, well, we know why people are immigrating to the United States. Their countries are crime-ridden, they're poor, and they have opportunity here that they wouldn't have where they are right now. That's why they're coming here. We get that. But this is a little bit more complicated, is it not, Robert?
I think it is, but when you talk about the moral compass of the nation, so we can't legislate morality. That's something that's taught at home. I don't think if you're going to have the 10
Every law is legislating morality, Robert. Every law is legislating morality in one way, shape, or form.
Rick, I feel like the Republicans want to dance around the issue and try to blame everything except for the fact that two 18-year-olds recently went and bought rifles and killed a grand total of about 40 people.
They could have used a car to drive into a crowd like the guy in Wisconsin. It's not the weapon.
But they didn't, Rick, and that's the point. And look, you know me. I've literally got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guns in the room right now just because I'm in Georgia. I mean, they just stay here. So it's not like I'm one of these crazy gun-grabbing liberals out here. My point is that if you're 18 years old and you have mental issues, maybe you don't get to go buy 2 AR-15s and 1,000 rounds of ammo. Maybe we should put some kind of barrier there. I think if we can disagree on that, then we're on.
But what about the military, though, Robert? What about the military and then going back to Rick's point? We're so tight on time. Someone could drive a car through a crowd. We had pipe bombs in Boston. There's a will, there's a way. A lot of people continue to argue that.
Yeah, the guy that killed 26 in Sutherland Springs had issues, and he was flagged, and the Air Force failed to put it in the system. The system's not going to stop all of these solutions. Look, I'm okay with looking for ways when somebody's proven that they're mentally ill. That's a different situation. But we have to think about hardening the assets and having more trained good guys and gals with guns. That should be the emphasis.
Look, Miranda, as I said earlier, you put an exception in there for law enforcement, military, and special training. If you want to be 18 to have an AR-15, go join the military and fight ISIS overseas. I think that's a perfectly good. Show that you want to serve and protect your country. That's when you get to have your weapons under 21.
All right. I don't know how you got that all in there, but you did, my friend. I should have been an auctioneer. We're out of time. Rick, your camera froze, but we're going to be right back.